Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mrs. Gilbert. I am recording Organization of Life, Lesson 5. This is going to be pages 16 and 18 in your interactive notebook. The topic is photosynthesis, and at this point, you are going to want to record that in your table of contents in the front of your notebook. Okay, let's get started. On the first page here, we have how do different organisms get their food, which is actually the first guiding question. And there are two options for living things to get their food. The first option is to eat or consume the food. And consumers eat for energy. These are called the heterotrophs, and they are said to be heterotrophic. So heterotrophs eat to get their food, which ends up being their energy source. Organisms that do this are animals, fungi, so things like mushrooms, fungus, molds, they're actually heterotrophic. They eat to get their food. Some protists and some bacteria do this. Please notice in the left-hand column on your note pages, there is a list of questions, and you need to follow along and answer the questions using the slides that I'm showing you here on the video. I'm not going to actually tell you where to write those. You need to figure that out as you go along on the video. So moving along, the second way that organisms get their food is to make their own food. Organisms that make their own food do this through a process called photosynthesis, and we've talked about this quite a bit. These organisms are called producers. They produce their own food. They can't go make a bologna sandwich. A plant can't just get up, walk away, and make a bologna sandwich. They're literally grounded to the ground that they grew from. So the only other option they have is to actually create their food right where they stand. Organisms that do this are plants, some protists, and some bacteria. Now, the main topic of our conversation today is photosynthesis. So we're not going to pay too much attention to the consumers, the heterotrophic organisms. We're strictly going to talk about the autotrophic organisms, that is, the organisms that make their own food. Autotrophic organisms are those that make their own food. They are the consumers. Okay. So, starting off, photosynthesis. Now, plants don't have lungs, but they still need air. So, where do they get this air from? How do plants breathe in the air?
Structure and working of stomata. In plants, most photosynthesis takes place in the leaf. Let us observe a leaf section to understand the location of stomata. The outermost layer is the waxy cuticle. Under the upper epidermal layer is a layer of palisade cells containing the chloroplasts. Beneath the palisade cells is the spongy tissue with air spaces. The stomata are located mainly in the lower epidermis. Stomata are nothing but minute pores in the lower epidermis of a leaf. Let us now observe a single stoma closely. The two bean-shaped cells enclosing the stoma are the specialized guard cells. The guard cells have a number of chloroplasts present in them. Observe that guard cells have a thin outer wall and a thick inner wall. The guard cells play a vital role by regulating the opening and closing of stoma. They control the exchange of gases between the leaf and the atmosphere. Air containing carbon dioxide and oxygen enters the plant through these openings, where it gets used in photosynthesis and respiration, respectively. During the day, the stomatal pores are open, and gaseous carbon dioxide enters the leaves. Waste oxygen produced by photosynthesis in the cells of the leaf interior exits through these same openings. Also, water vapor is released into the atmosphere through these pores in a process called transpiration.
I'm not going to show you that whole video. I'm sure that you're crushed. Anyway, to recap, plants breathe in the air through stomata. Now, keep in mind, plants aren't actually breathing, because in order to breathe, you need lungs. But in this case, we mean that they're taking in air and letting air out. They do this through the stomata. The stomata is a small opening in the leaf. When the stoma are open, carbon dioxide, which is CO2, enters the leaf, and oxygen, which is O2, leaves the leaf. Notice that's opposite from us. Okay, we actually take in oxygen when we breathe in, and we breathe out carbon dioxide, which is opposite from plants. Finally, transpiration is the loss of water vapor from leaves.
How do water and minerals get to the leaves? Although roots can exert a slight upward pressure, it is evaporation of water from leaves, a process called transpiration, that moves water molecules and ions up from the roots. Transpiration exerts a pull that is relayed downward along a string of water molecules from leaf to root. Hydrogen bonds cause water molecules to stick together, a phenomenon called cohesion. As each water molecule evaporates, it pulls on the next water molecule, and it pulls on the next. This relays the pull of evaporating water molecules all the way down to the roots. The adhesion of water to walls of the xylem cells helps to keep gravity from pulling the water molecules back down. As each water molecule escapes from the leaf, it pulls a column of water molecules upward. Solutes are transported along.
Okay, I just wanted to give you an overall view of transpiration and how the water enters through the roots, goes up the stem, and then into the leaf, and then finally out through the stoma in the leaf. Next up, what do plants eat? Oh, well, they don't eat. Then what do they need for nutrition? Just like us. We need things for nutrition as well, and so do plants. They need a sugar called glucose, and so do we. But we eat to get our glucose. We eat to get our sugar. But again, plants can't go and get it to eat it. They make it instead. Whoops, I have a frame that's covering up our glucose molecules. That's okay. Okay, so now where do plants get glucose anyway? Again, glucose is that sugar. It's a simple sugar that all living things need for energy purposes. Plants make their own food, glucose, through the process of photosynthesis. So what is needed for photosynthesis to happen anyway? First off, we need carbon dioxide. This is a carbon dioxide molecule. You have one carbon atom and two oxygen atoms. And when they get bonded together, this is what they look like. You have CO2. So two oxygen molecules, it's carbon dioxide. This is where the carbon dioxide gets into the plant through the stoma in the underside of the leaf. Secondly, we need water for photosynthesis to happen. Water gets into the plant through the roots. And again, in this picture, you see the process of transpiration happening. The water comes up through the roots, through the stem, into the leaves, and then eventually, if it's not used in photosynthesis, it goes out through the stoma. That's transpiration. But like we said, the chloroplasts in the leaves do use the water for photosynthesis. So far we need so far for photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is needed and water is needed. And finally, light is the third thing that is needed. Throwback to the energy unit. Light can be reflected, refracted, or absorbed. And on your note sheet, there is a little diagram you have to fill in by the arrows. Okay, ignore this word incident up here. This just means incident light rays coming in. Here you have light bending through a medium, so the refraction of light, the bending of light. Here you have light being absorbed into a material, and here you have it being reflected or bounced off of a material. Down here they also showed a light wave actually being transmitted through this material or through this medium as well. On this picture, this green material is supposed to be a leaf. When light is reflected, it bounces off of a surface and you can see the light, just as you can in this picture. Okay, plants look green because green light is reflected back into your eyes. However, the plants absorb all the other colors of light, except the green, because that's what goes back into your eyes, and they use those other colors to do photosynthesis. This diagram shows that right here, where you have all the colors of visible light coming into, this is a chloroplast right here. Kind of, this is what the inside of a chloroplast looks like. So everything comes in. The green light is what gets reflected out of the chloroplast, and that's why you see green from the plants. Some of it gets transmitted through the plant, so you can see more green. All those other colors stay inside the chloroplast, and that's what the chlorophyll inside of the chloroplast uses to make the sugar, the glucose, food for the plant. It's pretty amazing, actually. Plants strip the energy from light to make food. Plants contain chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a green pigment that is used to strip the energy from sunlight. Chlorophyll is contained in the plant's chloroplasts. Light enters the chloroplast, and through a series of reactions, energy is stripped from the light photons. And there's another picture of a chloroplast. Okay, to recap, the reactants. Reactant is another name for ingredient, and on the left-hand side of your paper, there's actually a blank where you have to write in the word ingredient. So reactants, the three ingredients for photosynthesis are water, light, and carbon dioxide. Light energy combines with the water and carbon dioxide to make glucose and oxygen. And that's just a statement in black on this yellowish screen, but I want you to stop and think about that for a minute. Can you imagine if your skin had the ability to make food just by standing out in the sun? If you could just stand out and breathe and take in sunlight, and just by doing that, you could make food for your body? That's pretty amazing, and plants do that all the time. You wouldn't have to go eat. I mean, I like eating, but regardless, this would be Pretty amazing, and that's what plants do. Products of photosynthesis. Another word for products are the results or the end product or the end result, like I said, of photosynthesis is glucose and oxygen. So there are two things that are left over after photosynthesis. This is the chemical formula that you need to write down on your paper. We have 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. That's what that stands for, is 6 CO2s, so 6 carbon dioxide, plus 6 molecules of H2O, so 6 water molecules. And when you mix those together, along with sunlight, which is energy, and then you mix in some enzymes within the plant, you end up with a molecule right here called glucose, and then 12, this is the sugar, by the way, and then this says 12 oxygen down here, which is, yes, that's right, I'm sorry, 6 O2, so 6 molecules of O2, which if you do 6 times 2, that's 12 oxygen atoms, but it's 6 oxygen molecules. Don't worry if you didn't understand what I just said. It's next year, 8th grade chemistry, okay? Working a little bit ahead, but that's okay. Regardless, I want you to be familiar with this formula, that carbon dioxide plus water with sunlight gives you glucose plus oxygen. Okay, you need to write down this picture, draw in this picture of basic photosynthesis. Your artwork does not have to be perfect, but I want you to get the gist of it in. Make sure that you label light energy, carbon dioxide, where it goes in, water, where it goes in, oxygen, where it comes out. I also want you to label what is not on this picture, and that is what is produced in the leaf, and that is glucose. So that is going to be a checkpoint for Ms. Felcher and I to know whether or not you are listening to this. You need to write right under this leaf the word glucose when you draw it. Now, a question that you have to answer on your paper. If a plant is given only green light as a light source, will it be able to make its own food? And why or why not do you think that? If you're stumped, look back at when we talked about light within the same lesson. Okay, the oxygen is given off as waste, but some is used in order for the plant to break down their food. So, oxygen is waste, but some of it is actually used to break down the glucose. How do plants eat their newly made food? Knowing, of course, that they don't actually eat, but what do they do with this newly made food? Plant cells can't immediately use the glucose as food because the molecule is just too big. So, photosynthesis, okay, it makes glucose. So glucose sugar is made for food through photosynthesis. But then glucose must be changed into energy. But then how does that happen? That happens through a process called cellular respiration in the mitochondria. This burns glucose and oxygen for energy. But that's next lesson. We're not going to go into that right now.
Hello. Today we are meeting outside so that we can discuss the concept of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process that most plants go through to make food. Plants get the raw materials needed for photosynthesis from the soil, the air, and the sun. When it rains, water gets absorbed into the ground. Plants take in the water along with minerals from the soil through its roots. In the roots, plants have tubes called the xylem and phloem. These tubes, or veins, run throughout the plant and bring water and minerals from the soil to its leaves. Leaves bring in carbon dioxide from tiny pores, or stomata, on the underside of the leaf. Now that we have water and carbon dioxide in the leaf, we are ready for photosynthesis, right? Wrong. We're missing the key ingredient. Let's bring out the sun now, please. Now it gets really interesting. It is in the leaves of the plant that most of the action takes place. If we look at a leaf under a microscope, we see that right below the outer layer of cells, there is a layer of soft, elongated cells called palisade cells. Inside the palisade cell are tiny nodules called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts contain a special chemical called chlorophyll. It is chlorophyll, by the way, that gives plants a distinctive green color. When the light energy from the sun is captured by the chloroplast, it is stored in stacks of thylakoid membranes. It is in these membranes that the chemical reaction of photosynthesis takes place. Chlorophyll is the catalyst. Think of it as lining up all the molecules for the reaction. Let's take a look at this reaction. The absorbed light energy from the sun is used to join water and carbon dioxide to form glucose, or sugar. The glucose is then distributed throughout the plant as food. Oxygen is a byproduct of this reaction and is released back into the air. And that is how most plants prepare food for themselves. I hope you've enjoyed this brief description of photosynthesis. And I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Okay, here we have a photosynthesis wrap. Dig it.
Photosynthesis. Let's get into this discussion of sunlight and transfer of energy. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this process of chemical reaction. Plants take water, sun, and CO2 to make glucose, the sugar that they use for food. They also put oxygen into the air so we can share, because oxygen is everywhere. The energy transforms from solar to chemical all the time, everywhere. The process is identical in every plant and every tree, enabling all living things to be. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this discussion of sunlight and transfer of energy. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this process of chemical reactions and synergy. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this discussion of sunlight and transfer of energy. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this process of chemical reaction. Let's take a look at the light reaction, making chemical energy when light is captured. Electrons flow through the photosystems, flowing so fast you might have missed them. Within the chloroplast lies the action. The thylakoid membrane is where it happens. ATP and NADPH are products of light, water, air, and space. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this discussion of sunlight and transfer of energy. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this process of chemical reactions and synergy. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this discussion of sunlight and transfer of energy. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this process of chemical reaction. The Calvin cycle, or dark reaction, doesn't need direct sunlight for it to run right. CO2 from the air enters the chloroplast, mixing with organic molecules for the last time with the help of an enzyme Rubisco called the fixation. I thought you knew this, yo. It forms a carbohydrate known as G3P. It's created, recreated, and recycled, you see. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this discussion of sunlight and transfer of energy. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this process of chemical reaction. reactions of synergy, photosynthesis. Let's get into this discussion of sunlight and transfer of energy. Photosynthesis. Let's get into this process of chemical reaction. Leaves on trees and evil weeds meet needs, making oxygen we need to breathe. You wanna learn it with these, you wanna master the keys. It's photosynthesis, listen to this please. Leaves on trees and evil weeds meet needs, making oxygen we need to breathe. You wanna learn it with these, you wanna master the keys. It's photosynthesis, listen to this please. Photosynthesis, let's get into this discussion of sunlight and transfer of energy. Photosynthesis, let's get into this process of chemical reaction to synergy. Photosynthesis, let's get into this discussion of sunlight and transfer of energy. Photosynthesis, let's get into this process of chemical reactions.
I hope you enjoyed that. And this is the end of our presentation.